After almost a century driving petrol and diesel cars, we're in the midst of an electric revolution, and Nissan have firmly positioned themselves as one of its leaders. Which means that while some car makers are still scrabbling around trying to come up with their first electric vehicle, Nissan have just launched the second generation of the best-selling EV in the UK, the British-built Leaf. Now, that first generation Leaf had an army of extremely loyal fans. It accounts for 50% of all EV sales here in the UK. But Nissan are now hoping to broaden that appeal with a car that has more power, extra tech, can take you further, and more importantly, costs less. And I think its new look will also win it some new fans. Now, of course, it's not going to please everyone, but in a world where EVs and hybrids have a tendency to look just a bit weird, and yes, Toyota Prius, I'm talking about you, the Leaf now just has a far more conventional look and resembles the practical 5-door family hatchback that ultimately is what it is. It's far more understated with sharp lines, a contrasting tailgate, a micro-style floating roof, while at the front there's a blue mesh effect grille with LED headlights. And it's here at the front that you'll find the discrete charging unit. Now, charging will take around 40 minutes at a rapid charging point. If you have a home charging unit fitted, that's going to take about 8 hours, and the car will cleverly take advantage of off-peak electricity. Leaf owners can also have solar panels fitted along with a storage unit, which means that once you've recouped the cost from installation, they can charge to their heart's content for free. Whilst the size of the battery itself hasn't increased, its capacity has. It's now 40 kilowatts with 148 brake horsepower, and Nissan claim a driving range of 168 miles under the new and more rigorous global testing scheme. And of course, the beauty of all that power and torque is how instantaneous it is. It'll reach 60 miles an hour in 8.2 seconds and has a top speed that's limited to 89 miles per hour. The throttle is so responsive, and when you add into that really nice sharp steering and a firm but still comfortable ride, it gives the Leaf an almost hot hatchy feel. It's an absolute joy to zip around town in this car. Although you do have to give yourself a few reminders that you are in an electric car. You should be slightly sensible when you're driving it because you don't want to trash the range too much. The Leaf comes with the option of the very latest in driver aids in the form of ProPilot, which is a semi-autonomous system fitted as standard in the top-of-the-range Tenker model and also available as an option. It uses 12 sonar sensors and 4 cameras to read the road, and it can control the car's steering, braking and acceleration. The same tech allows the car to park itself and activate emergency braking to avoid other cars and pedestrians. It's technology that is rarely seen in a car at this price, and although it does take a bit of getting used to, it quickly becomes second nature in stop-start traffic, where it really does come into its own. Lifting off the throttle in an electric car makes it slow down, which is the regenerative brakes collecting energy from braking and feeding it back into the battery. But the Leaf takes this one step further, uses a clever system called e-pedal, which is similar to systems you'll find in the e-Golf and the BMW i3. It allows you to drive the car using just the accelerator pedal to speed up or slow down to a complete halt, almost eliminating the need to use the brake pedal. If you've ever been in the Dodgems at the fun fair, it's a concept that you'll be very familiar with. And whilst it takes a few hours to get used to using that regenerative force of the electric motor to reduce your speed, once you do start to use it, you realise that you just want it in e-pedal mode all the time. It not only puts energy back into the battery pack and boosts the driving range, but it's actually just a far more relaxing way to drive. You're also, curiously, far more aware of what's going on the road around you because you have to preempt what you're going to do and work out exactly when you're going to ease off the accelerator pedal. So it makes you just more aware generally, which is no bad thing. Of course, the one question everyone wants to know about an EV, quite rightly, is how far can it go on a full charge? And if those new testing guidelines that I've already mentioned come down heavily on the importance of real-world testing, then this particular Leaf has definitely been through that. Now, I'm wearing an awful lot of layers today, and that's because I've ended up testing this car on what's turned out to be the coldest week of winter by far, which isn't the ideal time to be testing an electric car. but it's actually fared pretty well. And over a couple of days on a mix of country roads and urban driving, I got a range of close to 125 miles out of a full charge, which I don't think is bad at all, particularly when you consider that, yes, of course I've had the heating on and I have been listening to music, and I've even had the heated seats on a few occasions too. So when you consider that most of us take journeys of less than 15 miles, range anxiety doesn't really need to be an issue with this car. Inside, that normal car appeal continues with a simple dashboard layout based around Nissan's familiar infotainment system, with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto fitted as standard on all but the most basic models. In fact, the only real signs that you're in an EV are the gear selector here, which is from the original Leafs, along with, I guess, the start button, which has a little blue light on it. And then there's the zero emission graphic that pops up on the screen. And of course, the information that's communicated on there is also different. Whilst the dials here are also unique because they need to communicate different information about the range, the power output, and of course, the battery life. Now, while it doesn't feel that special in here, quality, apart from a few scratchy black plastics dotted around the place, is actually pretty good. And you do have to remember that the Nissan Leaf falls at the lower end of the EV market. One thing I do find quite annoying though is that the steering wheel only adjusts for height and not for reach, which makes it a bit awkward to find a comfortable driving position. When it comes to storage, it's about average, with small door bins, a little tray at the front, a couple of cup holders, storage under the armrest and a good-sized glove box. Here in the back you'll fit a couple of adults comfortably. Now, the driver's seat is set for James behind the camera, who is 6 foot. I'm 5'4", and look, still, yeah, there's a bit of space there. Headroom is pretty good too. Try to fit 3 adults in the back though, and things are going to get a little bit too cosy, particularly when you consider that leg room down in the centre seat is pretty much non-existent. Now, because of how the batteries are positioned, you sit slightly higher, which is fantastic for children because it means they get a really good view of everything around them. However, adults in here, particularly taller ones, will need to sit with their legs slightly bent. But having said that, you know, the Leaf does work really well as a good, practical family car. Whilst they cost slightly more than conventional cars, the appeal of electric is becoming increasingly easy to see. A single off-peak charge costs just a few pounds, whilst zero emissions from the electric motor means no congestion charges. Plus, of course, there are subsidies and tax incentives. And when you consider that the Leaf is now around £1,500 less than the first generation car, it starts to look very appealing. The thought of switching from the familiar diesel or petrol car that you've driven your whole life can be daunting. But the Leaf is one of the new breed of electric cars that will hold your hand through the process and make owning one feel like a far more mainstream choice.